Before we go into today's newspaper headlines, let's take a look at the news headlines for this morning. The family of the Cape Town Metro Police officer who was gunned down in 2012 while issuing a traffic fine has expressed shock at the sentence handed down to the killer. In the Western Cape alone, more than 446 police members were attacked while on duty last year. Residents of Easterus, east of Pretoria, have marched against drug abuse in the area. They've also called on President Jacob Zuma to intervene, saying the scourge of drugs has now spiraled out of control. Looking at your sports news, two cricket powerhouses are currently locking horns. That's the Proteas, who are currently playing their second match in the tournament against India at the famous Melbourne cricket ground, the MCG. The Proteas are currently having 4 wickets. A very good morning and a warm welcome to yet another exciting edition of your favorite program, Media Monitor, your program where we give in-depth analysis of the day news as well as events that got the country and the region talking. I am your host, Alicia Jali. Do share your views by calling us today on our topics. The numbers are +2711 714 6843, 714 6847, as well as 714 6857, or alternatively interact with us on Twitter at SA Media Monitor and on our Facebook page, Media Monitor, including our email address. It hasn't changed. It's mediamonitor@sabc.co.za. A very, very good morning to you. Let's welcome our guest this morning. We have Dr. Glenda Daniels, a lecturer at Wits University, as well as Akash Bamdeo, editor of the Sunday Tribune, joining us from our Durban studios. Glenda, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Alicia.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us again. Let's meet Akash. Akash, a very good morning to you from our Durban studios.
Good morning and thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much. All right, panel, let's have a look at the news that are making headlines throughout the papers today. There it is. It is the Sunday Independent. EFF's mystery spending in Maputo. The Weekend Argus horror hijacker set to go free. The City Press, state blows 30 billion rand on consultants. And of course, the Sunday Tribune there, not on our strip. Shut it down, shouts Umhlanga residents. And of course, the Sunday Times, Zuma poison plot. A very good morning to everybody. Now, panel, let's just start with the Sunday Independent. The front page there, EFF's mystery spending in Maputo. Now, it has come out that those allegations that were contained in Gayton McKenzie's letter to Julius Malema have actually been followed up by some members of the EFF. And now, leaked SMSs are actually confirming that there were transactions that took place in Maputo. Glenda, let's hear your views on this story.
Well, I think it's a great story, and I think it's very important that while the EFF accuses the ANC and the DA of mismanagement of funds, corruption, etc., all the stuff that the EFF make a big noise about, and a big noise is very good for democracy, but it's very important that the press also uncovers exactly what the EFF is up to. It would seem that unless if we don't believe this, that the EFF is somehow unraveling because of its own in-house faction fighting and problems. And when you get evidence of this, where they say they didn't meet in Mozambique, and yet, that's what technology is like today. You get uncovered with your credit card transactions in fancy hotels in Mozambique. So it's a great story, and well done to the journalists that uncovered that.
Akash, I mean, more scathing reports. What could this lead to?
Well, I think really the entire structure in the EFF is obviously going through its own internal wranglings, and that's gonna pose difficulties for the party leadership as we go into local government elections next year. And let's be very honest, the EFF was gaining considerable traction. They did fantastically well in the national elections. There was every indication that they were well poised to do very, very well in the local government elections. And of course, something like this doesn't help the party. And it's almost sad that a party that was starting to appeal to a lot of South Africans could be torn apart by infighting. And doesn't it seem like the way that most political opposition parties go in South Africa?
All right, let's move on to the City Press's front page there. And it says the state blows 30 billion rand on consultants. Well, according to City Press, they've trawled financial statements of 115 of the 131 national and provincial departments to see how much was spent on consultants. And of course, that amount was 30 billion plus. Now, will this put pressure, Glenda, on Nhlanhla Nene's upcoming budget speech? And who's going to be held accountable for this?
Well, I don't know if it's going to put pressure on his speech. I don't know if he's going to change his speech in light of this, but he might make a mention of the fact that this is an ongoing issue. This is not yesterday. It's just that amount of 30 billion is quite outrageous. It really, really is shocking. And especially if you look at what these consultants were used. You know, it's not specialist areas of engineering or technology for Eskom. This is about party organizing and event planning and what does it say here? Outsourcing functions on things that are really that administrative staff could do in government departments.
And they've also got allocated budgets for those for the people to actually organize within the departments.
Exactly, in the departments itself. So hopefully there'll be some kind of investigative process that gets conducted, and those departments that are, well, it seems like apparently KwaZulu-Natal is a big culprit, and Gauteng is, but they haven't really named which departments as such. The most improved national departments was human settlements, it says here. But, they must actually start naming and shaming these departments that use the most consultants. I'm not saying using consultants is a bad thing, but there's just got to be some kind of management about it and some kind of stringent procedure as to why it is absolutely necessary that consultants had to be used on a tender of 2 million to organize this party and 2 million here and 2 million there. And that's how you waste money.
Glenda, listen to this. And Akash, I also want you to listen to this. This amount is a fifth of last year's entire health budget, 6 times what was spent on environmental protection, and of course, more than enough to cover the entire Gauteng freeway improvement project. Your views, please, Akash.
Yeah, well, I want to go back to what you said about the finance minister. And what we do know is in his midterm budget statement in October last year, he said, we're going to need to raise about 12 to 15 billion rand more to cover what we're going to be spending in the new financial year. Now, the way that he's likely to do that is either going to be increasing the fuel levy or alternatively increasing personal taxes, the personal taxes that South Africans pay. Now, if you look at this 30 billion and if we halved that, well, Finance Minister Nhlanhla Nene then has the money that he would need to finance all of our expenses and ensure that personal taxes don't go up. And how wonderful that would be.
Very interesting indeed. Let's move on now to the Sunday Times front page story. And of course, that there is a very interesting story. It says Zuma poison plot. And this is, of course, Mantuli is alleged to have plotted to poison the president and has since been banned from Nkandla. I want to hear your views on this. Is this story making huge headlines that side in Durban, Akash?
Well, of course, this is a massive story. I mean, any story that involves the poisoning of our president is going to be big news in South Africa and nationally. But Alicia, I just want to point out one thing, one very, very important thing that's even contained in the report, which says a direct link between Ntuli Zuma and a poison plot could not be conclusively established. And let's also understand that you're dealing with matters that are extremely sensitive here. And I think we need, before we condemn Mantuli, we should really make sure that the facts are in fact correct. But the story worries me from a number of different levels. The first is, if there was a plot to poison our president, well, where did it come from? Was it completely internal? Was there an external link to it? Secondly, who else could have potentially been involved? Also, why was it that our president saw it fit to go to America and later Russia, according to the article, when we really do have some very good medical specialists in South Africa. So, it's a sensational headline, but I think once you start looking deeper into it, it's a story that raises some very, very serious and important questions that we should be looking at very, very carefully before jumping to conclusions.
Thank you, Akash. It says here that his physician, the president's physician, actually misdiagnosed him, and he was actually treated with medication that sought to make him seem to get more sick. Glenda?
It's a sensational story. This is quite a mind-blowing, mind-boggling story. And it's probably will make more than just South African headlines. It'll probably go around the world. Also, Russia's involved here. The US is involved, not involved in the plot to kill him, but he was here and there and everywhere. And possibly that they were also trying to cover up that he was poisoned by going and going to Russia and having a bit of a rest there. It's as Akash was saying, there isn't conclusive proof on the story, but obviously it needs further investigation. What is the link? Why did she do it? What was the motivation? There was, there were stories about her before that things weren't going right in their relationship. She was having an affair allegedly with the security guard. She was not the flavor of the month with the president. There was infighting between the different wives about who goes on which international trip with him. So we know all those stories. They are there as background stories and not necessarily conclusive proof that she actually poisoned him. But, well done to whoever found, but it says 3 sources, so we don't know. 3 sources confirmed that this happened, so we don't know who are these sources and why are they saying that this happened. Although it does seem to make a lot of sense. These things happen in South Africa, as we know. It's not uncommon for people to be poisoned, but for the president to be poisoned, well, wow, that's a huge story. That's big.
Thank you for that. Let's move on now to the Sunday Tribune. And I know Akash is really going to tell us more about this story. Akash, not on our strip is the headline there. Shuttered down, shout Umhlanga residents. Now, apparently, there has been a strip club that has been opened in the residential area of Umhlanga. Akash, go ahead and tell us your views about what's brewing in this story.
Alicia, this is not really the type of story that we'd ordinarily lead with, but what made it different this particular week is we've come out of SONA, where there's been a lot of politics, and we're about to go into budget, which is also very, very heavy, and we thought we really needed to give our readers something that's local, something that's different, something that's probably not political. And this is a story that's been causing waves. There's a lot of people that are unhappy about a strip club in the area, and then there's the strip club boss who's saying, I have every reason to run a business which I believe is legitimate. I'm creating employment for people. I'm serving a need because there's a demand for this type of business. And so we're really looking at the social aspects and the fighting whether to have this particular business or not.
Glenda, your views?
Well, I think as the editor of the paper says, it's nice every now and then to have a lead that's not a political lead and that's not an investigative lead. We're very, very heavy in South African, especially the weeklies, with big investigations. I mean, look, the Sunday Times and City Press had 2 fantastic big investigations. But every now and then, it's nice to have something something that affects local residents, what they're saying about it. Whether a strip club happens there or not is really irrelevant to me. I couldn't care less, but, so it's nice to have a different lead. That's all I'm saying.
All right, Glenda, on that note, we'll have a look at some tweets and see what our viewers actually think about some of the topics that we've been discussing this morning. Tim Kosi Apleni says, the EFF is an international ORG organization. Our leaders are expected to be everywhere. They're not limited into South Africa. Tamim Donzwa says construction companies, project managers, surveyors in human settlements projects are all consultants. Vumani Nkashankasha says uma kuyiqiniso ukuthi ubefuna ukudlisa uZuma akaphenywe bese aqeliswe eduze kukaZuma. Well, Vumani is basically saying that if it is indeed true that the First Lady Mantuli, they wanted to poison the president, she must be brought to justice and put very far, or removed rather, from the president. Thank you so much for your tweets. We're going to take a very quick ad break, but stay tuned for more Media Monitor shortly after this break.
You ask?
This is who we are.
We are technologically driven.
We are unashamedly Afrocentric.
We advise you not only on legal matters,
but on health issues as well.
We bring imagination to life.
We celebrate arts and culture and lifestyle.
We tackle life challenges head on.
we dig deep, we probe, we question.
We invite you to take a view from our house,
As we tell it without fear, separating fiction from factual.
We are the SABC News Channel.
All news, all global, all the time.
Welcome back. Well, there are also other interesting stories that didn't make the front pages. Let's have a look at them. Or should we have a look at the info boards before we look at those newspapers? All right, let's have a probe into those stories that didn't necessarily make the front pages today, but of course they have kept our interest. Now, Glenda and Akash, let's have a look at the Sunday Times there on page 4. Watchdog in mystery U-turn on Dramat. Now, another interesting story here. Innocent Kuba, who actually led the investigations into Dramat, Sibia and Malamulele cases, has apparently written very contradicting reports in terms of the first report. He was recommending criminal charges to be laid against Dramat and company, but then he soon withdrew them in a very short space of time. Last week it was SARS and Pillay dishing out the dirt. And we're going to have a look as well at the story alongside that page there, SARS Intelligence Group. It's page 6, and it says it was given carte blanche. Now, this story reveals that it is official that SARS had a rogue unit with some members or spies posing as drivers for high-profile members such as Julius Malema and even Figile Mbalula. What are your views there, Glenda?
Hey, I tell you, this is just totally confusing, the spy drama. You know, what's going on, who's stabbing who behind. In the case of Maluleka, for instance, I mean, it's a complete 360-degree turn. So I don't think he's reliable. On the other hand, a lot of other people have said that Dramat has been set up in this whole case, and they just, for political reasons, want to get rid of him. I tend to believe that. In the case of the Ivan Pillay story and the spy setup, you know, evidence upon evidence upon evidence is coming that these stories are actually true. They did have an intelligence unit that was spying on people's accounts and whatever. And in fact, even some of these spies are from the apartheid days. How bizarre is that?
Akash, what are your views on this story?
Look, let's deal with SARS first, and I agree with Glenda. You know, there's evidence that's emerging that in fact there was the special unit set up, and we know that's completely illegal. It's unconstitutional in terms of our law. The only people that can embark on intelligence is the South African Police Services, the National Defence Force, and National Intelligence. So the fact that SARS was doing something of the sort is absolutely wrong, and I think it's about time that there was some sort of formal investigation, perhaps even a judicial commission of inquiry into exactly what that unit did and whether there were, any serious rights violations. With respect to Dramat, also I agree, absolutely confusing. You've got two separate reports. Which report do we believe? And you can't help then draw the conclusion that there may be something personal on the agenda here. But here's what's important for me. Both SARS and the Hawks are very, very important organizations in our young democracy. And what's happening right now is undermining their credibility. And I really think we need some leadership to ensure that the nonsense in both these organizations is stopped and that they can carry on doing the role that they are meant to do, because really they're very, very important in our democracy.
My question was, Akash, you hit the nail on the head there, should we expect the NPA to start charging people? Glenda?
The NPA to start charging people? Well, the NPA has also had its own problems. So it's just, you don't know which institution to trust now. In South Africa, in our democracy, we've had just fantastic institutions. And some of the trusted institutions that we had, like the Scorpions, are now gone. So if the Scorpions were still here, I'd say the Scorpions should be investigating these people and bringing people, to book and charging them. I wouldn't know which institution to say, IPID or which the Hawks or who to say should be entrusted. Akash mentioned a judicial inquiry, a commission of inquiry. And that's what we tend to do all the time these days because we don't know who else to trust about who, and then there ends up being too many judicial inquiries, and then we'd also have some that get politically influenced, and then we don't trust the outcomes. So I'm afraid to say I feel pretty cynical about all this at the moment.
And we never get to hear the end and the outcome of those stories. All right, panel, let's now have a look at City Press's page 4. Now, the Sunday Independent was leading with this mystery spending in Maputo, but funny enough, City Press gave it page 4, and it says it goes into detail about the SMSs that were uncovered, of course, of those transactions made by EFF leaders there in Maputo and Mozambique. Glenda, your views on this story?
Are we back to the EFF story?
Yes. Well, it seems here that Gayton's letter to Malema has caused quite a ripple effect. Your views on that, Glenda?
Well, I think Gayton must carry on with his letters to Malema and with his exposés of the EFF and what's happening, because we do need to know what's going on. There was also the story of the car not so long ago, and now we don't know what the outcome of that was. Did they own a car that wasn't on the books of the EFF or not? So I would like to hear more. And, as I was saying, on many levels, I have sympathy for the EFF taking on the big ruling party and wanting public money to be accounted for and, about all sorts of issues. And so that's why we need also to open up investigations into them and what they're doing with money. This is also public money that they are spending. So we have to also, I'm very glad that the media is taking on the EFF, and I'm very glad there are people like Andile trying to say things about what's going on in there related to their finances, now Gayton, etc. Fantastic.
Akash, how has this story been treated in Durban? Is it as big as it is here in Joburg?
Look, I think the EFF doesn't have as big a presence in KwaZulu-Natal as it does in provinces like Gauteng. But I will say this much, there's always interest in the EFF. There's always interest in what Julius Malema does. And really, should we be surprised that he's courting the ANC, if that's in fact true? I mean, let's look at the facts. his business partners are not really supporting him like they did previously. So he's got to look at alternative sources of funding. And we know that in South Africa, that's very difficult, especially if you're a Julius Malema. Lots of people who've left the ANC tell you that it's very cold outside the party. So really, should we be surprised that the EFF is making overtures to return to the ANC? I'm not surprised by that.
I'm not surprised that the ANC is making overtures to Julius Malema. This is the enemy, so the way to deal with the enemy, as the ANC would see it, is bring your enemy as close to you as possible, so that this enemy doesn't grow in power, because the EFF does seem to be gaining popularity amongst rank and file of old ANC supporters. So I'm not surprised about that. However, if it is true that the ANC has been making overtures to Julius Malema and he flatly denies it, like the Bill Clinton story, I never had sex with that woman, and then it's found out later, say he makes a U-turn and he goes back and they all kiss and make up, he's going to be the biggest liar and the most discredited politician there will be at that particular point.
Akash, do you want to add something there?
I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. I mean, if you think in the run up to Mampela Rampele and Helen Zille joining forces, we had categorical denials that talks were happening. Whenever this type of thing is happening, it's not done, openly and transparently. It's all closed meetings and people getting together for a cup of coffee. But yeah, would I be surprised that in a couple of years Julius Malema will return to the ANC? Probably not.
All right, panel. Let's have a look at another story here that is not necessarily making huge headwaves here. It says, thanks to the exhaustive SADC meeting, potential conflict areas appear to be resolved. Now, that is in relation to the security as well as political unrest that we've seen in Lesotho. Now, Tom Tabane apparently is being sued alongside King Letsie III by, of course, the Attorney General there for what he says is an unconstitutional appointment of the President of the Court of Appeals. As of course, if you can remember, the story here is during the Lesotho Accord that was signed, it was said that nobody can appoint any leaders until after the elections. Now, your views there. Akash, let's start with you.
Look, I think firstly, South Africa's played a very constructive role in Lesotho, obviously on behalf of the region. We have a vested interest in the region in terms of water, etc. So, it's to South Africa's advantage that we do what we can to make sure that the elections, next week, are free and fair. And I think really for me, the plus in all of this is the fact that we have played the role of Big Brother. We have played the role of that responsible state and doing our bit to ensure that there's peace and stability on our continent.
Very quickly, Glenda.
It seems like Cyril Ramaphosa actually played a good role, unless the Lesotho people couldn't really carry out a coup properly. I'm not sure which was. As I say, I'm very cynical this morning. But there's elections next week. I hope they go well. The Tabani apparently had said they're not ready yet. They're not stable enough yet. But we haven't actually heard of any violence since the big drama a couple of months ago. So
all right.
Good luck to Lesotho.
All right, and moving on also to our other neighbor there, it's the Zimbabwe, it's the Sunday Times here. He's featured in the Sunday Times on page 8. It says, party time for Mugabe amid ruin. Elephant steak and buffalo rump will be on the menu when President Robert Mugabe celebrates his 91st birthday with a big bash at the Victoria Falls next weekend. Well, we can say whatever we want about the Zimbabwean president, but it seems like the people of Zimbabwe love him dearly. Akash, your views?
Hey, all I can say is happy birthday, President Mugabe. I think as you pointed out, there are many people who dislike President Mugabe, many people who love him. There'll always be those who will have something negative to say about anything that he does, and there'll be always those who agrees with everything that he does. So he's always going to be the type of man who splits people straight down the line.
Even with renewed sanctions, they still love their president. Very quickly, Glenda.
Do they? I mean, lots of people have left Zimbabwe and live in South Africa and live in the diaspora. all over the world. The country is in tatters economically. So I don't know if everyone loves Zimbabwe, the President, Robert Mugabe, at all.
Well, it seems everybody in Zimbabwe is going to be attending this big bash. But before we wrap this segment, let me quickly tell you about a funny story. In New Delhi, a childless couple in India has decided to bequeath their entire property, house, land and bank deposits to their pet monkey. News reports said on Thursday. Very interesting news. But let's have a look at what is currently trending on Twitter this morning. There it is. There's our funny story. Monkey said to inherit fortune from childless couple. They should move to South Africa.
So what will the monkey do with the money? It's hilarious.
All right, well, that's it for this segment. But have you been a victim of racial, ethnic differences at school? Before we do that, let's quickly have a look at some of the tweets that some of our viewers have sent us at home. There it is. Nirash Chat says, India falling apart in slog overs. We need players like Ajay Jajeda and Robin Singh. Rahil Kushid says, lightning quick, De Villiers, and he's coming into bat later against our bowling attack, and we seem to be collapsing. That is, of course, in relation to the current Proteas game versus India. Govind Kini says, AB De Villiers today, 0 overs, 0 runs and 2 wickets. Those are the news that are currently trending on our social media. We'll be tracking more stories for you right here on Media Monitor, but don't go anywhere. We'll be back after this break.
Technology is all around us and is improving lives across Africa, like how young Nigerians are connecting to the internet. There are doctors finding new ways to save lives in Cameroon, and the South African public transport system that is now getting Wi-Fi. We have gadgets, apps and loads more, some of which play a big role in Africa's growth. A huge part of this African growth is technological innovation. To find out a bit more about social media and technology news from here in Africa and abroad, join me, Siphumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. on SABC News.
Didier Drogba, a footballer from Ivory Coast, was named as the third most influential celebrity in Africa.
Where I saw him display, he's a very nice player. He always make an impact.
Drogba donated his $5 million endorsement fee to the construction of a hospital in Abidjan.
Well, there are some lesser-known football stars in the continent that you haven't met.
Really?
And are deserving of more attention.
I think we will do better.
The Journal, every Saturday at 1:30 on SABC News.
This is Media Monitor. Welcome back. Well, South African schools have recently experienced a rise in racial and ethnic intolerance incidents. The latest case just this week, a protest by parents at a Rudaport primary school calling for a black principal to step down. And in another case in the Northern Cape, a coloured teen was sexually assaulted on school premises after 4 of his fellow classmates found out that his mother was white. Now, the South African Human Rights Commission says racism cases reported to them are on the scourge, with 10,000 reported the previous year. Are these incidents a true reflection of what is happening in our country? Well, to discuss racism issues in our schools, we now welcome Mr. Panyaza Lesufi. He is the Gauteng Department of Education, MEC, as well as South African Human Rights Commission CEO, Mr. Kayum Ahmed. Gentlemen, a very good morning to you, and thank you so much for both being here.
Good morning, good morning.
MEC, let me start with you there. We've seen a growing number of cases of racial and ethnic intolerance in the very institutions that are supposed to be promoting social and racial cohesion. What is happening in our schools?
It's indeed worrying. I'm worried, and that is why I felt that we need to have a summit that will allow us to just to be open and be frank and say, did we miss it? Did we miss something? Is the rainbow nation that we're building filtering away? is there a need for us to find a mechanism of ensuring that we build that non-racial South Africa that we all want? I'm really worried, I must be frank, especially when it affects young ones. You know, you don't want our children to be reminded that there was this monster called apartheid in our country. Yes, they have to know it in terms of their academic studies, but they don't have to be subjected to humiliation and be told that their skin is not the right skin and that the other skin is a better skin. And if we start to have those kind of discussions, then we're in trouble. And that's why I'm worried. I really feel that as South Africans, we need to open up. And there are other things that we need to open up to. You know, I'm one person that believes if all of us, we say apartheid was wrong, and we swear that apartheid was wrong, there's one thing that we need to accept, that we need to share the consequences of apartheid and the benefits of apartheid, which simply means that there must be no nation that must be closed outside purely because they suffered under apartheid, or a nation that must continue to benefit because they benefited through apartheid. So when we start to share our problems, we'll understand that indeed as a nation, we are building that non-racial society that we all look forward to.
Mr. Ahmed, 10,000 cases just the previous year alone is an alarming number. But tell us a bit about the Commission's main concerns on these issues. It seems that they're getting treated as isolated incidents, yet we have weekly reports that are showing that these incidents are happening almost every week.
Absolutely. And this is one of those areas where we've begun to realize that dealing with individual cases on a case-by-case basis is important. But there's clearly a systemic situation in our country that needs to be addressed at a more comprehensive level. So we welcome the MEC's position that perhaps some sort of gathering is required where we are able to unpack these issues in a lot more comprehensive detail. We also recognize that racism can't be seen on its own. It's often connected to socioeconomic conditions, to poverty and inequality in our country. And we know that the white minority continues to hold the overwhelming majority of wealth in South Africa. And so you can't ignore that fact when you deal with the question of race and racism. Related to that as well are questions of ethnicity, language and culture. So it's a very complex issue that we recognize requires immediate solutions, both short-term as well as long-term.
MEC, when it comes to public versus private school curriculum, just like the K-word, a curious school, what is the difference there? Can a school continue as they wish because they're not a public institution?
No, remember, the National Minister is a National Minister of Education. It's not a National Minister of Public Education or Private Education. It's a National Minister of Education. I'm the MEC of Education in Gauteng, not MEC of Private Education or Public Education. So they're all regulated. And remember, the Constitution of this country is the supreme law of the country. So if it says racism is wrong, you can't say because I'm a private institution, in my institution racism is right. That is why we've got institutions like the South African Human Rights. But we need to start, I'm of the strongest view, that we need to start to review whether indeed our legislations are tight enough to declare racism an illegal activity and to ensure that those that commit acts of racism are indeed punished. I've seen many acts and I've analyzed many stories and cases that appear in court. Even some of the recommendations that come from the South African Human Rights. You understand that indeed the legal framework, it's not that tight enough to give them the powers that it need so that they can tackle this issue once and for all. You know, the issue is correct. It's influenced by economics, it's influenced by social upbringing, but it's also influenced by silliness, to be quite frank. I mean, there are other things that, I mean, if you take a young child like the story in the Northern Cape, how do you justify it in terms of economics? It can't be. It's just that someone feels that the other person is not important. So for us is to have that summit, emphasize the importance of having a charter, a transformation charter, and also let go of the privileges. I mean, there are privileges that people, they must accept that they have to let go. I mean, in the education institutions, I don't understand why our white counterparts can't teach learners in Soweto or in Tembisa. I don't understand that it must be learners that must wake up around 4 a.m. to chase quality. They're employed on the same scale and with the same privileges with our township educators. But there are some educators, even if I can advertise a post of a principal that I need, the best principal the country can offer, there are some people who never even apply for that post. And you ask yourself, why are you not applying? Purely because the post is located in the township. Should we still continue with those thoughts? We can't. And that's the strongest view. When we say we want to build non-racialism, it means those that don't even believe in non-racialism, at one stage, we have to impose non-racialism on them. And what I know is that non-racialism is infectious. If we can impose it on you, you'll embrace it.
Mr. Ahmed, in your cases and the research that you've come across as a commission, what do you think gave rise to the racial and ethnic intolerance within the schools? Many people are blaming the parents, actually.
In some ways, parents certainly have a role to play here, but we need to look at broader South African society, and I think what happens at schools is often a microcosm of the challenges we deal with on a daily basis as a broader South African society. 21 years into our democracy, we expect racism and racism-related matters to decrease. But what we're beginning to see is that people have become more brazen to speak very openly and to adopt racist attitudes 21 years into our democracy. I think that the memory of our apartheid past is slowly fading. And so the racists who suddenly disappeared in 1994 are suddenly making a resurgence now, 21 years later. But also on the question of the private schooling sector, I think often a lot of attention is paid to the public sector. And I think the MSc has done considerable amount of work to try and eradicate issues there. But what we saw in the Kuro schools case, which many people don't talk about, is that their share price actually increased after these allegations were made. So what role is business playing in ensuring that questions of race and racism and violations of human rights are eradicated in the private sector space? I think this is an important focus area that we need to pay some attention to.
Let me see, what do you say to that?
It's worrying. That is what I'm saying. Let's meet with the owners of these institutions. And I'm very firm. There is no way that this government, we need to tolerate racism. Wherever it comes from, both sides. I mean, the story I've just related of Rudiport, where other people believe that you can't have a principal of another color. If you allow that in society, it's a community members determine who must be a principal and use race as a determining factor. We are going to be in trouble as a country. So you have to be very firm. You have to be very strict to say, yes, we accept community participation, but it ends here. And that the responsibility to appoint a principal lies with the department. Community will recommend, but the final decision lies with the department. But if we have business people and institutions that, like IPC, for example, is an institution of the state with a state a pension fund, that it invests in these schools, and these schools practice racism overnight, their share price increased. It's indeed a shame, to be quite frank. And I hope those business people that believe that they can fund through our stock exchange racism, they're wrong. We are very firm, we are very determined. Where we stand, we want to build a non-racial South Africa. We want to build a non-racial country that all of us can benefit. And the responsibility to build non-racialism does not lie with the victims of apartheid. It lies with all of us. So it can't be a responsibility of some people to build non-racialism. It must be our responsibility. And in doing that, we have to ensure, even our national days, I mean, you go to April 27 and ask other people, is this your day? You find that other people don't even celebrate. It's a day that they believe they should go to some shopping or some other things. You go to Human Rights Day. We are going for human rights. Human rights is all of us. But other people don't see it as a Human Rights Day. They see it as another day for something. So as education, we also have a responsibility. We are not immune from this thing. Unless we teach our children about the history of this country, I can assure you they are going to repeat the mistakes that were committed previously. And we need to ensure we shape our curriculum to respond to those challenges.
Mr. Ahmed, very quickly before we take a look at some of the tweets that our viewers have sent home, there obviously needs to be some debates or interventions that need to happen. What is the Commission going to do to try and assist?
So one of the issues we want to focus on is to look at this issue a lot more systemically and a lot more broadly. We recognize that racism is a more holistic issue that needs to be focused on from multiple perspectives. I've just returned from Bloemfontein, where we dealt with a case of a primary school where a white teacher had the old South African flag on the front of his class. He went around to kids in the class with a mirror, holding it up to their faces, and asked them what they saw. And when the kids were too afraid to respond, he shouted at them saying, "You see a monkey, a baboon, use the K word all the time in the class." What's fascinating about the case is when we engaged with the kids in the class, 81% of them said that they told their parents about what was going on. Upon further investigation, we realized only one parent lodged a complaint with the Commission. That parent, in a school in which the overwhelming majority of teachers are white and students are black, it was the white parent of the white kids who lodged a complaint with the commission. Black parents were too afraid to raise issues with us. And so while we celebrate on the one hand the courage of these young white kids and their father to lodge the complaint, we recognize that black South Africans continue to feel marginalized and afraid to raise issues. And so the disempowerment of black South Africans is certainly something we need to work on as well.
Thank you so much for that. Let's have a look at what our viewers at home actually think about our topic this morning. Lucille Mayer says these kinds of incidents will continue unless we start focusing on our inner world as that connects us. Very true there. At Kosatu today says, hashtag Kosatu has condemned the boarding school bullying scenes and calls on society to speak out on such heinous deeds. And Bulletproof Soul says parents inculcate racism in their offspring from childhood but fight tooth and nail when it's reciprocated on them. MEC, very quickly, your parting words. What's the department going to do? I heard you talking about launching a campaign. When is it starting? What can people do?
Well, we are in the next 2 weeks or so, we're giving the opportunity to our Premier as well as the National Minister to assist on how to shape that summit. But I'm hopeful. But South Africans must not lose hope. There is nothing that will defeat non-racialism. The choice our forebearers and our leaders have made to embrace non-racialism, that choice was correct, and we need to defend that choice, and we will defend that choice.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time here this morning on Media Monitor. Well, that was, of course, the MEC, Gauteng Education MEC, Mr. Panyaza Lesufi, as well as the South African Human Rights Commission CEO there, Mr. Qayyum Ahmed, joining us to talk to us about the growing issues surrounding racism and, well, racial intolerance in our schools. We're going to take a very quick ad break, and when we return, we're going to analyze the State of the Nation debate that's got tongues wagging. Stay tuned for that after the break. This is SABC News.
Icons is a unique visual journey of some of South Africa's greatest citizens.
When I wake up in the morning, I've got a challenge.
You succeeded in getting me to do something which is absolutely against my nature.
If I do something, I do something properly.
In celebration to 20 years of democracy, the newly released book 21 Icons offers exclusive access to a remarkable spread of South African legends.
It tells their personal stories and unique portraits that reflect our country and, above all, its people.
That's Kaleidoscope, Sundays, 5:30 p.m. on SABC News.
Welcome back to Media Monitor. Now, there were mixed reactions when Zuma responded to the SONA debate. The president pleaded for cool heads to prevail in Parliament, and he was also applauded for being diplomatic at confronting the issue of last week. Let's take a look at this quick insert.
We thank all honourable members for their contribution to the debate. We welcome and appreciate all inputs that have been made by all members.
Well, panel, what do you think of Zuma's response, of course, to the vicious debate on his State of the Nation address? Social media went abuzz, calling him the comeback kid, the best speech in a very long time. Let's start in Durban. Akash, your views.
Speech. I thought it was probably his best speech ever. He was short, he was to the point, he answered the questions directly. And I must say, the entire State of the Nation debate and the President's response, I felt enhanced our democracy. I thought it showed our democracy is a lot more resilient and a lot more strong than we often give it credit for. And really, you know, just to sum up, I really thought the President did a fantastic job in his response to the SONA debate.
Glenda?
Well, I wouldn't say it was fantastic. I'd say the best he could have done in the circumstances. At least at that point, he stopped giggling and chuckling. A very, very serious thing happened at SONA with the walkout, with the security police, the violence that happened, the signal jamming, etc. So the last thing the president should have done there was to be chuckling. It seemed like he was mocking the rest of us South Africans, and a lot of us felt really alarmed by it. So when he did the reply, obviously his advisors came to the party, and the advisors then said, look, that was not on, the media said this, everyone else said this, social media said this, so now you've got to show leadership, you've got to be serious, you've got to take everything seriously, and that's what he did. So I'm pleased he did that.
All right, let's now close off our show officially by asking my panelists, Akash, what do you think will be making prominent news headlines this coming week? We've got load shedding, it might come back. We've got developments on the Pillay and the Anwar Dramat stories. What do you think will be making news headlines?
None of those. The
Why?
big story of the week is going to be the budget address. Finance Minister Nhlanhla Nene is going to tell us how he plans to spend about 1.3 trillion rand, and how he's going to potentially increase our taxes to be able to spend that type of money. So for me, the budget address is probably arguably even a bigger address than the State of the Nation address, because it's the action that's required after the State of the Nation address.
Thank you, Akash.
So definitely, Budget Wednesday, biggest news story of the week.
Thank you so much for joining us in Durban there, Akash. He is the editor of the Sunday Tribune. Glenda, very quickly, what do you think will be making headlines this week?
Well, I don't think it will necessarily make headlines, but I think it should. I'd like to hear what the response is to the Mantuli story and the poison story. Obviously, I think the budget's going to be a big story.
Thank you so much, Glenda.
Okay.
Well, panel, you've been absolutely amazing this morning. And our viewers, remember, always your contributions and suggestions are highly valued. To engage with us, you can follow us on Twitter at SA Media Monitor. You can share your views and comments about the show on Facebook. Go to www.facebook.com/Media Monitor and tick like on that page. You can also email us your views about the show at mediamonitor@sabc.co.za. Once again, thank you so much for watching Media Monitor. Do join us again next week. And just in case you missed this live show, remember you can still catch the repeat tomorrow morning at 2 a.m. Alternatively, go to our YouTube link. It's www.youtube.com/SABC News. From myself, Alicia Jali, and the rest of the QTIV team and the panel, you have yourself a blessed Sunday. Goodbye.